Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome all for the third edition of Rise Samvad Talks. Today we have three speakers, Ayushi Gupta, Jatin Chowdhury, and Jayati Deshmukh. So, Ayushi Gupta received BTech from IP University Delhi and MTech from IIIT Delhi, and also worked in JIIT Noida, and he's a PhD student in data sciences under the supervision of Professor G. Srinivas Raghavan. Research interests are in natural language processing and machine learning. Ayushi.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Rise Samvad Weekly online series.
The second speaker is Jatin Chowdhury. He is currently a senior data scientist at Cisco with 10 plus years of IT industry experience. He has won multiple awards which include EHRC RX Smart Decoder, Data Science Impact Award for Bottom Line Reduction, Stevie Gold Award for Innovation in Business Applications. He is a PhD student with Professor Chandrasekhar Ramanathan and works on multi-agent systems and conversational agents. Jatin Chaudhary.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
The third speaker is Jayati Deshmukh. She is a PhD student with Web Science Lab under the guidance of Professor Srinath Srinivasa. Her BTech was from Gujarat Technological University and MTech from IIIT Bangalore, and she's a gold medalist in both graduate and undergraduate studies. And she works in autonomous systems and multi-agent systems. Jayati.
Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone. Happy to be a part of Rise Samvad 2020 and present my research here. Thank you.
Yeah. So Arushi will start now.
So in this talk, I'll be presenting my thesis work on querying knowledge through multi-hop inference in knowledge bases being supervised by Professor G. Srinivasa Raghavan at IIITB. So this is the agenda for my talk. I'll give a brief introduction of the problem and talk about two representative cases of doing multi-hop inference, one over knowledge graphs, other over a textual knowledge base, followed by some future work at the end. So what exactly is a knowledge base? It is a collection of facts, rules, assumptions about any system that can be used to draw upon some knowledge or solve any task. These knowledge bases can be in a structured format, like in a graph which is represented in the form of a triple that has a subject, relation, and an object, or in an unstructured format, which is completely natural language text. These knowledge bases are great tools for supporting tasks like structured search, relation extraction, reading comprehension, question answering, or dialogue systems. What exactly is multi-hop inference? It requires combining multiple pieces of information to solve any inference task. So on the right hand side, you can see different question answer queries which are answered using multiple pieces of information. That information could be in the form of a triple, or it could be in the form of web snippets, which is a textual base. So first we try to do multi-hop inferencing over knowledge graphs. Over knowledge graph, inferencing is generally done by doing link prediction over a knowledge graph. So this sort of inferencing does not provide capabilities for answering complex queries, but it just tries to do missing link prediction on a knowledge graph. The other way to do inferencing is that we anchor it over a natural language query. When we anchor reasoning over natural language query, either we could map these statements to an intermediate format shown in a figure on the right, and then use some sort of logic-based reasoning to get the answer for the query. Or the other way is that the natural language query is kept as it is, and we apply some embedding-based deep learning models to it. So the second one is the problem that we're trying to approach in this case. I'll show a representative query and answer and how it works if you search for it on Google for it. So for example, if you have a query, who is the director of Amir Khan acted films which released in 2001? If I search for the same on Google, then it is able to identify that I'm asking for movies of Amir Khan, which were released in 2001, but it is not able to identify the context that I'm asking for directors of those movies. So a multi-hop inference is missing here. Again, if I have a similar query like who are the actors in the films written by John Travis, then it is able to identify the movies of John Travis and their writers, but not the actors who were there in those films. So to solve this sort of a problem, we actually need to combine, we need to find all the possible paths over a knowledge graph between entity in the question and the actual answer. So we have proposed a solution framework for this, in which, given a knowledge graph and a natural language query, we first extract entities from the query, and then we try to find all possible paths between the question entity and the correct answer entity. We also generate some incorrect answers in order to train an inference model. The inference model is a natural language inference model, which takes premise and hypothesis and label pairs as input. And we have two models here that we have experimented with. That's an eSIM NLI model, that's a pre-existing one, and an HRPA model that we have developed. And we use these models to infer answers to these queries. So actually, we posit a question answering problem as an NLI problem and try to infer answers from the NLI module for the queries. So what exactly is NLI? Given any two sentences, that's a premise and a hypothesis, it just tries to determine whether the hypothesis is entailed by the premise, or the two sentences completely contradict each other, or there is completely no relationship between the two. So there's a standard SNLI dataset that is quite huge and human annotated, and deep learning embedding based models have quite good accuracy on this dataset. So one of the models that is used is called eSIM. That's an enhanced LSTM model that we've used for inferencing here. This model is a combination of bidirectional LSTM and a tree LSTM model, where the premises and hypothesis sentences are encoded using the bi-LSTM model, while their parse trees are encoded using the tree LSTM model. The local inference for the words, their context, the clauses, and the phrases, all of this local information is collected through an inference, through an attention model over these sequences and parse trees. And later on, there's another composition layer of LSTM that can compose the local inference sequentially and finally predict the classification accuracy. So this model achieves quite good accuracy on the SNLI dataset. So we adapt this model to our problem scenario and try to see what accuracy we get on this model. There were some limitations to this model in the sense that when we try to find a path over a knowledge graph between the question entity and the answer entity, there can be multiple paths. So the complete path can be quite long, and it causes the sequence length to be very large. This causes a lot of samples to be discarded, and also there is no interaction between the individual paths getting captured. So we developed a model called hierarchical recurrent path encoder model. It is based on an HRED model that handles sequence of queries and generates context-aware suggestions for users. So for this model, we try to encode every possible answer for the query, and for all the possible paths, we encode those as well. So we have an encoding for the hypothesis. This is now used to generate attention over each of the individual path encodings. This is done so that we know which part of the premise is important from the hypothesis perspective. So we have an attention encoding for this, and we also, the path encodings are also again in a hierarchical fashion encoded by another LSTM, so that we can capture the path interactions. These three vectors, the attention vector, the hypothesis vector, and the path encoding vector, they are all concatenated together and fed through a feed-forward model to do classification whether the encoded path is following the hypothesis or not. So the representative data set that we have chosen for this task is called MetaQA, that consists of queries like the ones that I showed earlier. It is a multi-hop reasoning data set that is based on a Wikimovies knowledge graph. Each question asks about some topic entity, and the answer is also an entity. It consists of a knowledge graph that is around 1 lakh triples, 40,000 entities and 6 relationships between them. The baseline model that is used in the paper is a variational reasoning network. That's a probabilistic model that handles the topic entity recognition as well as the multi-hop reasoning part. They use a reinforced algorithm with variance reduction technique in order to make the complete model trainable. So this is their model, where first they try to find out the probability of the question entity given the query, and once the question entity and the query is there, they try to find out the probability of the correct answer. It consists of 1 hop, 2 hop, 3 hop question answer pairs. It's a quite big data set, and they have experiments on this with the 1 hop, 2 hop, 3 hop accuracies as 97.5, 89.9, 62.5. This is the part where the entities are known. The EU part refers to, and the entities are also unlabeled in the dataset. There are some other multi-hop inferencing data sets as well that we have seen, which include Complex Web QA, WikiHop, Hotpot QA. These are all, they are similar in line that they are all multi-hop inferencing, just that some of them are based on textual databases like Wikipedia. Some of them are based on knowledge graphs like Freebase. So we've done experimental results on MetaQA. For every question answer pair, we convert it into a multiple choice question answer format by having the correct answer labeled as entailment, while the incorrect answers negatively sampled from the knowledge graph as the contradiction. So we convert the MCQA format to the premise, hypothesis, and label format. This is the sample for the ESIM model, where all the triples are connected by AND, while in the case of the HRPE model, we have different paths which are connected by a sentence ending mark. So this is done so that the model can recognize where each path ends, and it can encode the paths accordingly. So from this, from these two models, we have the following accuracy. On the last column in the table shows accuracy from the baseline VRN model, which is for 2 hop, it is 91.9, and we have got 95 and 99.29 using the ESIM and the HRP model. While in the 3 hop case, it is 58 and 59.7. We have got 84.62 and 89.42. So the MCQA accuracy is different from the classification accuracy, as the NLI model gives us classification accuracy. Our metric is exact match accuracy. So for every question, it is considered correct only if all of the answers that are there for the question are matched with the predicted entailed answers. So I'll talk about the next task that we have used to do multi-hop inferencing, that is over the textual knowledge base. This is called explanation regeneration, that requires reconstructing gold explanations for elementary science questions using a corpus of scientific and world knowledge facts, which when linked together form a detailed explanation for reasoning required to answer a question. So on the right hand side, you can see a representative example where the question asks about example of an organism taking in nutrients. There are 4 options, and in order to reach the correct answer, what is the exact chain of facts that is required? That is called the explanation for this question answer. It could also be considered as a graph traversal problem, where one has to start hopping from a starting fact and then collect all facts in the chain until you reach the correct answer. So for this, we've used a world tree data set that has around 5,000 natural language scientific questions. These questions are for elementary school, like ranging from grades 3 to 8. And these are all multiple choice questions along with their explanations. And the knowledge base consists of around 10,000 curated scientific and world knowledge facts. An average explanation is a combination of 5.6 facts. So it is a multi-hop inferencing task. And the explanation sentences, the explanations are created such that even a 5-year-old can understand them. And to answer a question correctly, the relevant explanation facts need to be retrieved from the knowledge base also in the correct order. We've done baseline experiments on 2 models for this data set. One is a TF-IDF based model where a question along with its correct answer is treated as a query, and each fact in the knowledge base is also considered for this query, and we find the cosine similarity square between cosine similarity score between this query and each of the facts in the knowledge base, and just rank them on the scores obtained. So on the evaluation data set that consists of 496 question answer pairs, we got a MAP score of 0.32. We also used a BERT re-ranking model to improve this, in which we classify each fact in the knowledge base based on its contextual representation with the question and the correct answer obtained from a fine-tuned BERT model. So we basically fine-tuned the existing BERT MLM model by taking the training data set and labeling each of the relevant explanation fact as a 1 class, and each of the non-relevant fact in the knowledge base as a 0 class. So in this case, we got an MAP score of 0.49 on the evaluation data set. So this is a sample result from the baseline model. So the question is, which of these is the greatest change that can be observed between summer and winter? Now the correct answer is the amount of daylight, and on the left hand side you can see the explanation facts required to answer this question. The TF-IDF model, since it is based on sort of lexical overlap, it is able to recognize some of the sentences in the top K ranked, while there are some sentences which do not have any overlap and they're not ranked in the top 100 at all. The BERT re-rank model is able to recognize them and rank them, but still not in the correct order as the explanation order. So we realize that there is a requirement for a model that can handle this. So we want to start with the retrieved facts that we have from the BERT re-ranker and a 2-level TF-IDF model as the possible explanation facts for any question answer pair. Then we can generate dependency graph structures for the question, the answer, the correct answer, and the possible explanation facts. Then we plan to use phrasal entailment and some external sources like ConceptNet for computing the weights between the nodes of these dependency graph structure. Then develop an integer linear program that can maximize weight of the graph that will connect these 3, the question, correct answer, and the knowledge base fact nodes. And then choose the best one among all these possible support graphs. The correct explanation facts can then be gathered from the topological sort of the maximum weighted graph that we get from the ILP. So my future work entails implementing this ILP model for the explanation regeneration task that I just discussed, and also explore other models like graph convolution networks for this. And we also want to do transfer learning on other multi-hop data sets that I've identified, like path questions and complex web QA for the first task, which are based on knowledge graphs. And also we want to explore how we can compose recursive representations for any natural language statements in a KB, which can be then represented in a set of weighted first order logical formulae, and then try to use sort of a theorem proving framework for answering any queries. So that's all from my side. Thank you. I'll be happy to take any questions in the chat box or later at the end of all the talks. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayushi. Now the talk will be from Jatin.
So this talk is on Modbot, which is an auto moderation framework for interaction with multiple conversational agent. And I am Jatin Chaudhary, a part-time student at IIT Bangalore. And I'm pursuing my PhD under the guidance of Professor Chandrasekhar Ramanathan. So the agenda for the talk is as follows. I'll give you a brief introduction about the setting and the context for the framework, and then I'll introduce the framework architecture. We have deployed a prototype, so I'll tell you a little bit about the scenario of the prototype and the deployment architecture of the prototype, and then some learnings and outcomes that we've been able to get out of the prototype, and ending with the conclusion. So beginning with the introduction, let's first understand what are conversational agents. The conversational agents, which are also known as dialogue agents, popularly are also known as sometimes chatbots, are basically computer programs or computer systems which are designed to interact with users in a natural language. And of late, the focus has been that the interaction should be as natural as possible, and the end user should feel like they are talking to another human being rather than a computer program. Now, there are two broad classes of conversational agents. One is task oriented and another is non-task oriented. Now, the task oriented are the programs that are developed for particular and very specific task or a subset of tasks lying under a main task. And these are relatively shorter conversations and happen within a closed domain. For example, if you go to a popular reservation booking app, you will find their digital assistant helping you to book a hotel flight after asking you a series of questions. Whether you can, just ask Alexa to order a product for you, and then you can check status for your reservation or booking or any order or any shipment from a tracking app. So these are the kind of tasks which task-oriented conversational agents perform, and these are relatively shorter conversations. Whereas non-task oriented conversational agents do chit chat within an open domain with the end user, and mostly these are information retrieval based or rule based. They either fetch a response from the corpus which is already there, they try to match the conversation and try to figure out what was the response earlier from the corpus, or today's research has empowered bots to generate a response which was never existing in the corpus. So these are the two broad categories of conversational agents. And the user experience in dealing with such agents is that if it's a simple task, the agent is engaged through a single interface. It may be through voice, it may be through text, it may be through command line, and the user inputs its query in a natural language form, and the conversational agent responds with an output or an answer. And typically you've seen how Q&A tasks are performed. So either it's a short conversation in which the system is driving the conversation by asking repeated questions to the user that give me A detail, give me B detail, and the conversation proceeds forward. Or the user can at once specify what it wants to do by mentioning all the intent and the related entities within the same input. But this dynamically changes when there are more than one conversational agents. Now we are living in a world surrounded by Google Home, Alexa, Siri, and a lot of conversational agents. And we do see that for complex tasks, even searching something on the web, you are prompted to go to multiple interfaces to fetch information from more than one agent. And then the user is expected to discover these agents, switch between interfaces, interact with agents, capture the response from agents, and then combine the responses to accomplish the task. Now this may be not so regular in a day-to-day setting, but this is fairly common within an enterprise where each and every team, each and every department is trying to drive their user support by front-ending these conversational agents to the end user. And human support is actually very less. If you look at the way Uber operates, I highly doubt if you have ever talked to somebody at customer support at Uber. It is driven through chat. It is driven through an interface of a conversational agent. So that is the way enterprise is moving, and that's why this scenario of interacting with more than one conversational agent becomes even more important to deal with. Now, with Modbot, we introduce a framework for seamless interaction and moderation with multiple conversational agents, which are deployed across domains and platforms. The framework efficiently provides the user with a single interface. and this is very important, that it is a flexible and intelligent ecosystem which can harness the collective capability of already existing multiple agents. Now, when we solve or when we try to build an agent, much of the focus is in building one single agent with the desired capability. Whereas there is very limited knowledge associated with whether another agent already solves a subtask or a sub problem of the problem that you're trying to deal with. So, and it is very true in an enterprise kind of setting where team operates in silos and they have different technical maturity and different approach to creating these conversational agents. So there are high chances that the work may be replicated, or the bot that one team is trying to develop already, the capabilities already exist in another bot. So with this framework, we're trying to provide an ecosystem which can harness the power of all these existing bots and can really collaborate and perform a relatively complex task. Now, this is not a framework for the development of new or conversational agents from scratch. This is to basically moderate between existing bots in an ecosystem. Now, coming to the framework architecture, this is a high level architecture image of the Modbot framework. And going into the details,
have a look at these pictures.
The major components are the domain solver, the natural language processor and the machine exchange processor, the knowledge base, and the communication manager. Now we'll deep dive into each of these components. The domain resolver is the component responsible for finding and selecting the domain and the agent. Now, the domain resolver could do this task in using multiple approaches. The first is the easiest and the most simplest, which is the classification or the ML-based approach, in which if the data sets of training and testing of individual agents and those domains are available, then those data sets can be used to train a machine learning model to select and identify an agent which can solve that given task. The rule-based approach is the next approach, which uses keywords, wake-up words, and activation phrases to identify which agent should the query should be routed to. Now, this rule-based approach is something very familiar, something very regular that you come across in systems like Alexa, where you just have one user interface. And there is literally no way to go and select another interface. When you compare it with something like a bot built on Slack, you can go to a Slack channel and direct all your inputs there if you know that that particular Slack channel or an app will solve some of your problems. Another approach for domain resolution is registry-based approach. This is a Yellow Pages-like directory service based on IEEE FIPA, which is the Foundation for Intelligent Physical Agent Standards. The onboarded agents register themselves on this service once they come online, and this not only facilitates users talking to those agents, but also has the capability for agents interacting with each other, which is something that we target in FutureScope. The second part, or the second subcomponent of this framework, is the natural language processor. Now, this natural language processor further consists of the intent identifier, which identifies the intent in the user's query, the entity resolver, which identifies keywords and values, basically the entities in a query, the role tagger, which extracts the entities and tags different role like start date, end date, origin, destination, the language parser, which is to convert the user's utterance into a logical form that can be understood unambiguously by the machine. So though all these components are usually part of any agent itself, but given the different maturity at which the different agents in different domains could be, this has been made part of the framework so that some of the general facts or some additional knowledge bases, or this is to provide external capability to enrich the query while providing it to the agent. The machine exchange processor complements the natural language processor, and it provides with services to manage ontologies. It also contains an exchange adapters which are an ensemble of interfaces, because you need to deal with different bots which may be deployed within different interfaces or platforms. There may be different chat platforms, there may be different conversational agent platforms. So you need to have exchange adapters available within the framework so that the user can operate with a single interface and with a patched communication to these different platforms. There is information blender, and this information blender is kind of the same as an inference engine, which should be capable to infer from multiple responses received from the conversational agents. There are feedback services. These feedback services gather feedback of the conversation so that the algorithm could be tuned, the domain resolver could be tuned, just like any other machine learning conversational agent, which is tuned with the help of real life conversations and feedback. Now, the telemetry subcomponent gathers data from multiple parameters that are monitored for agent. For example, a typical scenario is an agent going irate or an agent going rogue. So the telemetry helps monitor the health of the system and maintains that there are not any ongoing issues in the framework. Now, the knowledge base is the component responsible for knowledge management of the framework. It stores both structured and semi-structured information about the agents and the framework itself. And since there are different domains and we need to enrich the user query with different formats of data and information, so the knowledge base should allow different knowledge representation formats to store different forms of knowledge. The communication manager is responsible for all messages, information, request, and response exchange within the framework, and it keeps a track of the context of the chat that is happening between the user and the agent. Now, technically, this component comprises of webhooks plugged into multiple chat platforms and messaging queues, and it is the sole responsibility of this module to provide a safe and secure dialogue management and the configuration for the same. So once again, this is the reference architecture, the domain resolver, the natural language processor, and the communication manager. The user interacts directly with the communication manager, which seamlessly, with the help of domain resolver, knowledge base, and natural language processor, patches the request, routes the request to domain specific agents. Now, these domain specific agents are abstracted to a form that we assume that they will provide the right answer to the best of their capabilities. So with this framework, we deployed a prototype in the global procurement services team at Cisco Systems, which I happen to be a part of. And at GPS team in Cisco Systems, an employee handles multiple tasks. An employee takes client requests for information. They activate accounts of clients. They approve expense reports. They initiate business processes like changing supervisor, and they approve renewal of contracts. So there are multiple tasks done by multiple team members or a single team member in the global procurement services. Now, over a period of time, different teams within GPS have deployed CAs to accomplish one or more of these tasks. So the scenario in front of us was that, can an employee using our framework do this task through a single interface? So for this, we identified 3 such conversational agents: the travel and expense agent, the contingent worker agent, and the statement of work agent. These agents used Webex Teams as the communication platform and delivered key capabilities to GPS's stakeholder. This is an example of the screenshot of the travel and expense agent. The example of queries handled by this agent could be like, what is the status of my recent expense report? When will I get confirmation of travel ticket? Is the expense report approved or not? And here you see a screenshot of what the bot responds with. The contingent worker again handles all the queries with respect to contingent workers or red badge workers. Now this is supposed to increase as we all expect the gig economy to grow and enterprise to hire more and more contingent workers. So suppliers ask these questions regarding the activation status of their employees, whether to change a supervisor of a temporary employee, and what is the process. And even hiring managers ask about the processes of outsourcing a software development activity. So this is some of the queries that the contingent worker bot answers. Then there is a statement of work bot or the contracts bot that take care of all the queries related to a contract, whether it be the initiation of renewal or the approval or just checking the status. So the approach that is taken to partially deploy this framework in such a setting is that the training dataset for all three agents were available, and a classifier, which is a machine learning algorithm based approach, was leveraged for domain resolution. Now, as you see, a typical training data for any agent would include a query, an intent, entities, action, and utterance. So there will be multiple records of such pairs of query, intent, entities, action, and utterance, which go about defining the response of a agent. Now, what we did is that for our ML-based approach, we took out the query and mapped the domain and agent to it, and did not actually process any intent, entities, action, or utterance. We trained our classifier on doing the domain resolution based upon the queries or the intent that a particular agent uh, caters to. Using this, we were able to deploy the framework on WebEx Teams itself, and wherein you can see that the single agent itself was able to handle all these different domain requests without any interface change, without user being patched on or taken on to a different screen, and it is pretty much seamless and effective. Now, the only problem with such a setting was that we were not able to get a feedback on how correct or incorrect the result was, because most of the queries were coming from a database, and as you might understand that in an enterprise setting, it is difficult for users to then first interact with the bot, do their work, and then provide you feedback of whether it was correct or not, because primarily they are coming to the bot for the correct information, and they assume that whatever the conversational agent is providing them is a correct information. For example, a user has no other way to check the status than ask the team, and here instead of the team, it is asking the agent. So and there is no internal mechanism of capturing that kind of feedback within the WebEx Teams platform itself. So the learning and outcomes from the prototype deployment is that the first question that comes to everybody's mind is that if you have all the training data, if you have all these components, then why don't you just create a single bot? Like, get done with all the individual bots. Just why doesn't the GPS team comes together and creates a single bot by taking together all the intents, combining them, and training a powerful machine learning algorithm on top of it? So the pros and cons of such an approach are that even though the deployment architecture is simple, the training time may become too large eventually if there are too many intents in the merged data. Then another pro is, just like the Modbot framework, that if there is one single bot, then there is one single access point. Now, the accuracy of an individual intent identification takes a hit when there are large number of intent. Plus, manually, someone has to resolve the overlap or resolve some repeated intents within the different bot. Now, the biggest pro of a single bot is that you can do end-to-end testing on a bot, whereas in Modbot it is difficult to do an end-to-end testing just from taking the different intents from different domains and bots. Now, the pros once again is that it resolves intent at training stage, whereas the con is that all teams should have access to their goals, and they should agree on keeping that intent and responding to that intent in a particular way. All right. So even for Modbot, while we applied a machine learning domain resolution approach, there were in fact two approaches that we had to take and consider. That the first approach was that the Modbot handles users query input at every turn. So at every turn, the query flows through Modbot. Modbot does the domain resolution and passes on that query to the particular agent. Now, the advantage of this is that it takes less deployment time. It avoids the situation of agent becoming irate. It is well suited for single turn queries where there is no relation of the current query with the previous query. And then it is very easy to maintain context across different goals and intent. So if the natural language processor extracted some of the intents and entities and roles from the previous query, it is easy to take forward those to the next query. Whereas the con is that the Modbot needs to handle context switching at every point of the conversation. So in cases where there is a shorter conversation or a system-driven conversation where the system is asking for some inputs subsequently to the user, it needs to handle the context at every given point. Now, this intent overlap becoming high eventually is indeed a problem. And then the framework needs to maintain the entire context, all the entities, all the roles throughout the conversation until it comes to an end. So the second approach is that the Modbot hands off the conversation to an agent after it does the domain resolution. So the agent will then take over, and once the agent is sure that the task is complete, the agent hands it off back. Now there are one major con in this approach is that the user may want to switch to a different goal during a multi-turn dialogue, and the agent should also know how to hand it back. So there needs to be a change in the architecture of the agent itself to be able to hand the context and all the entities and the intents back to the framework. So the current challenges, so we could not gather a lot of data due to some practical problems in the setting. But the challenges that we faced is that ensuring the stability of the system is a challenge. Then creating end-to-end testing scenarios and tests. No existing data set appears to be as a benchmark for this kind of scenario. And then tracking context and context switches is anyways a problem that the framework tries to deal with. Now we would like to extend this framework to other form of dialogue and even take it to inter-agent interactions, because as you know, agents could perform some tasks partially. So we need to see if we can infer from those partial result and combine and give back a full result back to the user. So in conclusion, the proposed framework addresses a real life enterprise problem. Now there are multiple platforms that lets users create their own agents, even with minimal coding or no coding through flowcharts and simple APIs so that even kids can create them. But currently there's no system that lets user reuse and repurpose already created agents. And the end user experience is missing from most of the solutions which try to build these complex and efficient conversational agents. So this is what the framework intends to fill, where the framework kind of wants to fill the gap. I thank Professor RC for his guidance on this, and Mr. Nilashish Kumar, the India site lead for Cisco GPS, for agreeing to sponsor and deploy the prototype in the team. Thank you.
Now, Jayati.
Hello everyone. Today I'll be presenting my research titled Computational Transcendence in Ethical Autonomous Agents, and I'm working on this under the guidance of Professor Srinath Srinivas. So this is the brief overview of my talk. First, I'll give an introduction to this topic. Next, we'll have a look at our proposed model called computational transcendence. Third, we'll have a look at one of its use case where we can apply this model called autonomous traffic lights. And finally, I'll conclude with some future directions of this work. So let me start with a question. So imagine that there's a ship or a boat with a few people on it, and there's a huge storm in which those people are stuck, and somehow they barely manage to reach an uninhabited island, something like this. And now they don't have any way to contact anyone for help, and they are stranded on this island till help arrives. Now there are two scenarios. Let's say case A. So in case A, these people, since they are stuck on this island for too long, they just get frustrated, start getting violent, and many of them don't even survive. And case B is where these people just face the situation, help and cooperate each other, and survive till help arrives. So what do you think is more likely? So actually most people think case A will happen. People will just be violent and they won't be able to survive for long. And there's an interesting example in this book titled Humankind, a Hopeful History, where the author compares these two examples. So on the left, there is this very popular book called Lord of the Flies, which is a fictional book in which something similar to case A happens, where some boys who are stuck on the island, they just become very violent, they turn onto each other, and many of them don't even survive, but that's a fictional story. On the other hand, on the right, you can see, this is a real life incident in which these 6 boys were stuck on an island, and they just helped each other out, cooperated with one another. And for example, they even kept the fire going for almost 15 months till this person in the center reached out and rescued them from that island. So the gist here is that humans have an intrinsic model of ethics within themselves, and in very challenging situations, they can rise above themselves and work for the collective good. So with this story in background, let's start. So what we are seeing these days is there are a lot of real world applications of autonomous systems which are being deployed. So for example, in Jatin's talk, we saw about chatbots which can respond to queries in real time on various online portals, to even autonomous vehicles. So a lot of research is going on in various these kinds of autonomous systems, and gradually we are moving towards true autonomy in within the computational models of these systems. So by which we mean that these systems should be able to take decisions by themselves without any external help from other humans. Now we would want these systems to act ethically, and then the question arises that how do we combine these AI based models and ethics? So this is not something new that is being thought of. So there are various research groups, think tanks among the governments, and even scientific research bodies like IEEE, which are designing policies and frameworks so that the AI based models can be combined with ethics, and when they are deployed in real world, we can ensure that they act ethically and so on. So yeah, there are various groups which are working on that. So what we are saying is we need to design models of ethical autonomous agents instead of autonomous agents which can act ethically. So there is a huge gap between these two things, and I'll elaborate more on that. So what you're saying is ethics should be an intrinsic part of the autonomous agents themselves, rather than an additional layer which is added on these computational models. So it won't work out if we add this additional layer of ethics on top of the models, because of some of the following things. So one, it will be too use case specific. So for each of the scenarios, one need to design the ethical model which will apply. So that way it will be very complex, and we think that it will also be comparatively, it will have a lower performance level. So what do we mean by ethics? Ethics is a very huge area, and we are talking about something very specific. So we are saying by ethics, we mean as the ability to choose the right action. So within the context in which that autonomous agent is operating, it should be able to take the right action. And for example, in human beings, we just say it's the common sense, right? But autonomous agents don't have a model for that. So an example here is, let's say when a person goes to take his driving test, no one asks this person like, what will you do in a trolley problem kind of scenario, whether you will hit pedestrian A or pedestrian B. No one asks that. It is assumed that most probably these kinds of situations won't arise, and even if they do, the human will be able to take the correct action in that specific context. But when we talk about autonomous vehicles, this is the first question that is asked, that how will this autonomous vehicle respond in this kind of trolley problem like scenario, and so on, because the reason is that these autonomous vehicles don't have a common sense kind of model, right? But even common sense is like it's a big thing. So we are again looking at something even more specific. We are talking about individual utility versus collective utility. So by that I mean that in any scenario, what will the agents do? Will they always take actions aligned to just their own self-interest, or can they sometimes rise above themselves and take actions which are good for the collective? Now, so here we are saying that we need to design computational models of the underlying framework of ethics, rather than just looking at, ethical design for specific use cases. And then thus we can say that ethics is not about just following the norms. So let's say for a specific use case, there's a list of rules which are given and the autonomous agent just follows that, then we cannot say that it's acting ethically, and in some of the cases it might even fail. We'll see that. Also, ethics is not about just positive or negative reinforcement. So let's say we just train these agents based on rewards and punishments. Even then, one cannot guarantee that they have learned the correct ethics, and that's because of the following challenges. So these autonomous agents, right, when they're operating in these real world systems, they have some of these characteristics. First is that these are uncertain environments or open world systems. So when we model these environments, right, we cannot model all the intricacies or fine grained properties of these environments. And sometimes we don't know, like on taking a specific action, what will be its consequences in the environment and so on. So that is the first challenge. Second one, when these agents are operating, they won't always have all the data they need to take the right decisions. They might have partial data and sometimes even noisy data. So the data which they get from other agents in the system or from the environment, it can be partial or noisy. Third, these systems are basically shared state space. So by shared state space, I mean that the actions of one agent don't have consequences only on that agent, but it also has it also affects other agents in the system. So that's why we say it's a shared state space, and this in turn leads to emergence and non-linearities in the when the agents operate in these kinds of systems. Third, and the fourth point is that these autonomous agents, when they're operating in the real world, they need to make real world decisions. They don't have the luxury to just ponder on the ethical dilemmas and then to act. They don't have that luxury. They need to make decisions within seconds or even less than that. So yeah, these are some of the challenges which we would like to address in our models as well. So next, let us move on to the model which we are proposing, called computational transcendence. So computational transcendence, we can define it as the innate intrinsic capability of the autonomous agent itself, such that it can extend its identity, and by identity we mean its sense of self, such that it can encompass other agents within the system to various varying extents. So I'll give an example here, and that will be more clear. So think of a person who is, let's say, a CEO of a company. So when he takes the decisions for his company, he is rising to the level of the CEO, and then he takes the decisions in that context. Now the same person, let's say, is also a president of his apartment committee. So in that context, it doesn't matter whether he is a CEO or someone else. In that context, he rises to the level of the president of that committee, and he'll take decisions for that for his society or apartment and so on. And the same person, when he is taking decisions for his family, he is at the level of his family and taking decisions accordingly. So thus we are saying that same agent can operate at different levels, extend its identity to different levels, and take decisions with that awareness. Now, computational transcendence basically depends on two things. So first one is the agent's capability. So by that we mean that not all agents can extend to the same level. Different agents, based on their capability level, which is their innate characteristic, can rise to different transcendence levels, and they can rise in two ways. So I'll elaborate that. So first one is in space. So by space we mean how many other agents in the system can it extend its identity to, and in time. So by time we mean how far off in the future it payoffs does it care about. So how long in the future it gives importance to the payoff. So these are the two ways in which the agent's capabilities differ. And second is context requirement. So in that specific context in which that agent is working, what is the requirement? What is the maximum level to which the agents can extend? Next, let us have a look at some of the key characteristics of computational transcendence. So first, it's bottom up. By that we mean that computational transcendence is the property of the agent itself, and it is an intrinsic characteristic. So it is not learning these kinds of properties from external reinforcements or such kind of things. It is its intrinsic characteristic. And also, once we develop its formal model of computational transcendence, we would like it to be explainable, such that imagine that there is an environment in which there are multiple agents which are operating at different transcendence level. Then we can justify that why a specific action was taken by an agent in that kind of scenario. It should be explainable. And finally, these agents have internal and external strategies. So I'll probably elaborate this point once we come to the use case. Next, let us compare computational transcendence with some of the similar models. So first, let's see how computational transcendence can be compared to altruism. So in case of altruism, right, there's this dichotomy between the agent itself and others. And in this scenario, the agent is aware that by taking a specific action, it will get a higher payoff, but it will think of the welfare of the collective, and it won't take those kinds of actions for the collective good. So it will basically sacrifice some specific steps for the collective. But that's not what we mean when we say computational transcendence. Here, the agent rises virtually to encompass other agents in the system to different extents. And for that collective, right, it can still take actions for based on the self-interest of that collective in mind. It need not act selflessly in that kind of scenario. So that is the difference between computational transcendence versus altruism. Second comparison is between computational transcendence versus dominance. So in case of dominance, right, the agents will impose their own self-interest on other agents. So, but if we look at computational transcendence, it is just the opposite of that. So in this case, the agents are aware of the role they are playing in the collective, and then they'll choose the actions accordingly, which will be useful for the collective rather than just themselves. And yeah, so that's how it differs from dominance. Next, let us move on to the use case of autonomous traffic lights. So here, imagine that there is a road network within a specific region in a city, or even at a whole at a city level, where there is an autonomous traffic light which is operating at each junction. And each of these traffic lights are operating at different transcendence levels. How that actually works out, I'll explain in a minute. And based on that, they'll strategize basically for what duration should the lights be red or green at each of these junctions. And finally, we can compare, measure like what is various kinds of metrics, for example, average wait time of the vehicles, and compare how this model fares in different kinds of scenarios. So we can first, before going on in more further detail, let us see what are some of the ethical dilemmas which can arise in this context of autonomous traffic lights. So first, let us take the example of a non-transcendental autonomous traffic light. So here, this autonomous traffic light is just aware of the traffic around its junction, and it's operating only on that knowledge, and it will act on its own self-interest, right? So it will try to reduce the wait time at its junction, and that's it. That will be its goal. So it can strategize. For example, it can try to be green for comparatively a little longer, so that the traffic just moves to the next junction and so on. So if we think in this scenario, the traffic at that junction may reduce, but overall, if we think of the region, then the traffic will increase. The traffic will increase, and even the wait times will increase, because now the traffic will start piling up at the next junctions and so on. Now let us see how, in the same scenario, what will happen if we have a transcendental autonomous traffic lights. So in this case, this traffic light is aware of its role in the bigger region as a whole, and thus it will strategize accordingly. And the interesting point to note here is that the strategies of this traffic light, right, they will be applicable to all the traffic lights in that region, including that traffic light itself. So there's no dominance or anything like that. Those strategies will be applicable to all traffic lights within that region. So yeah, maybe I'll move on to this diagram, and it will make things more clear. So imagine like this is the road network, and at each intersection there are autonomous traffic lights operating. So for example, this traffic light on the top left, it is at level 0. So it is just caring about the traffic at its own junction, and changing its red and green light timings accordingly. This blue one is at level 1, so it has knowledge about traffic lights one hop away, and based on that, so all the traffic lights in this region, they'll be affected by this traffic light. And similarly, this green traffic light, for example, is level 2, so it has knowledge about traffic lights 2 hops away, and so on. I'll also explain the internal and external strategies at this point. So by internal strategy, we mean how will finally all these traffic lights within this region operate, and how will they strategize their red and green light timings. And external strategies is how they'll interact with, for example, traffic coming from outside their region. So that is the difference between internal and external strategies. So next, maybe I can show a quick demo of the traffic simulation around IIIT-B. So in this version, so this is our institute, IIIT-B, and these are some of the main roads around IIIT-B. On the right, for example, we can imagine there's a road coming from the flyover here, and so on. So this current version is not the autonomous traffic light version. Here, the traffic light durations are fixed, but later on we would like to incorporate autonomous traffic light and compare. So here you can see there are these two traffic intersections here, and there are traffic lights turning red, green at both these junctions, and we can see the buses and cars moving on these roads and so on. And we have the graphs which are updated in real time. So I was talking about the wait time, right? So here we can see, for example, average wait time is around 10 to 11 seconds and so on for the vehicles and so on. So we want to extend this kind of system to cover bigger region, as well as to incorporate those autonomous traffic lights and see how it compares. Right. So with that, I'll move on to the future work. So in future, we want to build a formal model of computational transcendence. Also, like I mentioned before, so we are not, so this model is not specific to any specific, designed for any specific use case. It is like a baseline layer of ethics for all the models actually. So we will test it on different use cases, and then we would also like to compare it with other similar techniques, for example, normative models or even reinforcement based techniques, and see how it fares. I would like to thank Karnataka Innovation and Technology Society and MINRO for supporting this work. And these are some of the references which were cited in the presentation. With that, I'll conclude. I'm happy to answer any questions or comments. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. Now the floor is open for questions from all the three talks.
My question is for Jyoti. Thanks, Jyoti, for the wonderful presentation and the simulation. So just one thing, when you say that computational transcendence is not going to be either dominance or altruism, are you saying you're looking at Pareto-optimal solutions?
Correct.
Is that what you're getting
at? Yeah. So, the traffic light should be such that at least within its region, it should take into account all the the traffic in its region and like strategize accordingly. Correct.
Yeah. So where is ethics in this? So you're looking at efficiency as a parameter and looking at the most optimal. You're trying to make it better off without making anybody else worse off, right? So I'm just wondering, given that that is where you're situating, how does ethics come into play here?
Yeah. So here the point which we are trying to make is that how is this individual versus collective behavior will affect so the point is that when the agents will act with the collective in mind, their actions will be ethical. That is what we are trying to say. Okay. Ethical, like I mentioned in the introduction, ethics is a very huge area. We are talking specifically in context of these kinds of scenarios and how it in terms of payoffs of the agents and in those kinds of contexts.
Yeah. Just to interject here, the kind of questions Jayati is looking at is the dilemma between individual utility and collective good. And the ethical dilemma that comes in that kind of dimension. So, suppose I do something that is in my self-interest, but if everybody does that, that does what I did, if they chose my choice, the collective would be worse off and so on. Whether it's a Pareto optimality, we can show some cases of Pareto optimal states which which are actually grossly unethical. In fact, one can show where the system can get into an exploitative stable state, where if you try to move out of that, somebody would get hurt. Okay, and so Pareto optimality by itself need not imply ethics. In fact, it would be more than that.
Mm-hmm. So just one last thing. So you mentioned about an assumption that human actions, human beings inherently take ethically good decisions, and it's intrinsic. So that might be contested quite a lot.
Yeah, that's true actually, and I would still refer back to that book titled "The Humankind." So in that, the author he gives examples across a lot of different scenarios where people do act for the collective in mind rather than just taking selfish action.
Yeah, see, the claim is that ethics is innate, is an innate property of human, and not we are not claiming that humans always act in an ethical fashion. That's a different thing. We are not saying that actually. What is being said is that ethics is something that is intrinsic to human behavior and not something that is imposed. That is, even if there were no governments and even if there were no states as such, a group of humans can still act ethically. And there are, a lot of examples to show that.
Hi Jyoti, thank you for the nice talk. I had a question in the middle. Somewhere in your presentation, you mentioned about that these autonomous agents would have a sense of self. Can you elaborate on that?
For example, let me take the example of, let's say, autonomous traffic lights, right? So if the traffic light is just operating with its own, like at level 0, then its sense of self is just itself. So it is aware only of itself, and it is taking actions accordingly. But in context, let's say at higher levels, level 2, let's say, it is aware of other traffic lights within that region, and it is able to take decisions and strategize, keeping in mind that all the other agents in that region. So as a whole, as a collective, so by its sense of self in that context, it will mean that it is aware of that bigger region than itself, and it can work with that in mind.
So you are not delving into this concept of self from the level of having like consciousness.
Yeah, that will be difficult to.
Yeah, that's what I was slightly like how I was excited by that. Is it possible to have agents which would have a consciousness? So
Yeah,
that's
it would be, I guess, great to have, but yeah, we are still probably not there to bring in the
okay.
consciousness into it.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, any further questions?
I have one more question for Jayati. This is Jaya. So I was expecting to see this notion of scale when you mentioned space and time in your modeling of the computational transcendence, and this notion of roles, because you were saying about how an agent in different scenarios would act in a different manner. So the thing is, I'm wondering if you can, I mean, when you introduce role, it will probably not require the space and time aspect as well. I mean, you have to balance what you will keep and what you will not keep, right? Because when space and time comes into play, one is scale comes into play. That
Right.
is somewhat similar to what you have done of your multi-hop thing, right? So
Right.
the number of hops will sort of say what the scale is. The other part is the discretization, right? So what would you understand in terms of, I mean, when you have space, what is, space in the sense of smaller scale versus larger scale, and you taking whatever kind of inferences based on different discretization chunks, right? So that will also be something very important, I would think.
Right.
Yeah. So if you have any comments, you can. I mean, I was just expecting to see those, but I was wondering if you considered those already, or.
No, I think that is a very good point. I think when we talk about space, it means basically, I think scale is a much proper word actually in that scenario, where at different levels, so it basically means scale actually, right? For example, at a region level or at a state level, country level, so it is actually a scale might be a better description of it.
Any further questions to any of the other two speakers as well?
I have a question for Jatin. So I'll go. I have a question for Ayushi also. So I'll finish Jatin and then I'll go to Ayushi. So Jatin's. So I was wondering if you have. I mean, you mentioned about how hard it is to test your chatbot, but have you considered any simulations that you can sort of manicure or run on, like something like Mechanical Turk, where where you can actually get feedback from users on the performance of a chatbot? Is that something that will be useful for your work?
Yeah, so we are also considering trying to stitch together some different databases so that we can actually simulate the concept of different agents across different domains. And like a typical machine learning scenario where like you saw in Ayushi's presentation, that you not only have the right answers, you also generate a set of negative test cases from within the data set itself. So currently that is the approach that I am trying to leverage to create some testing scenarios for the framework. but definitely I will take the suggestion that you've given in mind, because it's a different setting. If you, I've been in operations analytics, and once the user is done, for example, if you call Airtel and you're done with your query, and they tell you that they're going to patch you with a feedback system, and that is where you cut the call. So that feedback is, in practicality, that feedback is very difficult to achieve, and that is why some even higher order algorithms for domain resolution, which rely on positive or negative feedback, could not be employed to train that particular part of the framework.
So when you have something like social interactions, there are probably no definite answers, but can you look at something like, you essentially require a knowledge base from which the agent would answer questions on, right? So can that be a definite knowledge base, like something in science or medicine or something like that? Will that help your case?
Yes, so essentially, then it boils down to becoming a problem of creating a better bot to answer questions from that domain. And that is something that we really don't want to dive into, because our assumption is that bot on that particular domain answers correctly all the questions. What we are trying to deal with here is that how a user discovers that bot. For example, in the current situation of Corona, you've seen multiple kind of conversational agent which help you take a assessment and figure out whether you have a problem or not. Now you will see a different variant on Arogya Setu. You go to Apollo Pharmacy, you will get a different variant, and you go to some other hospital, they will have a different variant. So the agent discovery process itself is so frustrating. And plus, it also depends upon the level of technical maturity or medical maturity on which they would have developed those solutions also. So when we focus on one particular knowledge base or try to get together knowledge base, again we are falling into the trap of assuming that all the knowledge will be located at one particular knowledge base, or it is centralized. Now it is a it is an effort not to let centralization of knowledge happen, and let the concept of being an ensemble, that nobody is more intelligent than all of us together. So I think in its spirit, the framework kind of tries to communicate that itself.
Yeah, actually, that's a similar question I had for Ayushi as well. So where do you stop? What knowledge base do you use for your models, right? So is it something that is like that gets progressively added, the knowledge that will be used to answer the questions that you get? Like, for example, for QA, you need a certain knowledge base from where you can learn the answers from, right? So yeah, so that's a combined question for both of you, actually, Ayushi as well as Jatin. So
I guess in my case, I have the question answering data set is the reasoning is actually done over a knowledge base. So yes, it is domain dependent, but that's what we are trying to do, that if we can adapt it to other domains as well. So I have done smaller experiments with another data set called path questions. So it is based on a different knowledge base, and if the same model can be applied to that different knowledge base, and how basically what sort of accuracy we can get with the same model.
so if your knowledge base gets changed, as in, like, for example, new science comes in and then new research updates your knowledge base, then will your model have to adapt? What does it need for it to get adapted to the newer ones then?
Yeah. So we are computing embeddings for the knowledge base entities. So if newer links are getting added to the knowledge base, then that means
so it has to be a dynamic system in some sense, right?
Right.
Yeah. So just adding to what Ayushi said, this is Raghavan here. I don't think, I mean, the scheme that Ayushi talked about, where we're not creating any intermediate sort of knowledge structures. I mean, when we answer the question, we go back to the knowledge space as it is currently, and we generate our embeddings or whatever, and then we come up with some inferences. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. So it will basically try reasoning on the knowledge base as it is currently.
Okay. That is.
Yeah. However, if we try building an intermediate structure, then of course your question will be valid. How do we update it when the underlying knowledge base changes? And that's, I guess, a different question. We're not looking at that right now.
Okay. So will that be something that will be worked upon, or the intermediate structures, or that's not part of Ayushi's?
Hopefully, I mean, we're also, again, we're like what Ayushi talked about, the having a first order logic sort of intermediate representation for the knowledge and all that. And now, again, it's a sort of design decision on whether the first order representation, is it going to be generated on the fly, or is it going to be sort of static representation which gets updated every now and then? That we haven't thought about that yet. But so our thought process is more on, I mean, given an unstructured knowledge base, how do we construct a first order representation? And then from the first order representation, how do we generate an inference? But should this be done offline, online? That's, I guess, a different engineering decision. We haven't got to that yet.
Okay. Thanks, Raghavan. Yeah.
So maybe I have similar questions. I think part of were already asked by Professor Jaya. So in this, I think you're not having any specific representation for the knowledge base, right? That's what Professor Raghavan also was saying. That is, the background knowledge is somewhat implicit from all the documents you read, right? And, so when if that is the case, will it be able to answer, for example, will it be able to acquire some kind of common sense in some sense? You know, for example, it has read so much of documents about, let's say, people going on boats and so on, and will be able to answer questions about, right? How does a boat look like, or does a boat fly, or things like that. And, so, have you tried any of those questions that can come up, in some sense implicitly, and not a knowledge that can come up implicitly and not explicitly through the actual story itself?
No, I don't think we have tried that. Yeah,
Not
it'll be
yet.
interesting to see if it has actually learned some of those commonsensical things.
Yeah, if it actually picks up some other.
Yeah, exactly.
And in Jatin's case, also I have a similar that let's suppose that you're automatically identifying the domain, right, for a given question, and then asking. And let us say that for a given question, it is relevant to more than one domain, but their answers are actually contradicting to one another. So, how do I bring up my computer or something like that, or how do I install something, and it may be relevant to two or more domains at the same time, but not only are their answers different, but they are contradicting. One would explicitly contradict the other, and so how would you resolve such kind of?
So right now, what we're dealing with is probably information-seeking dialogue, and there are other forms of dialogue where you probably mediate, or you probably negotiate, and there are multiple such scenarios, and one such is asked by you that how do we differentiate or decide which one is correct. So currently the system will not deal with that, and one of the challenges that I've mentioned is that in fact one of the cases could be that two agents could partially solve a problem, and then the complete answer could be an emergent answer out of those two, which can be taken as a variant of a contradicting and non-contradicting answer from two different agents. So today, when this happens in the framework, then both the answers are presented to the end user, but haven't decided upon how to go about the correct or incorrect one, because in our approach, we've taken the entire sequence of query, intent, entity, action, and response from those individual agents, but the part that we use for resolution is just the query and the domain and the agent which it belongs to. And that is why it is also sometimes beneficial when intents overlap. That a lot of agents today respond to hi, hello, what is your name, and help me out, or start, stop. These intents are there, which are common to a huge number of bots, and therefore when one tries to form a single bot and try to disambiguate between intents or resolve that overlap, they have to go through a longer exercise and longer training times. But at the current level, if it receives a response from two, it does not discriminate between either of the response or tries to figure out which the right one is, because it does not have the knowledge to figure out which one is correct, which one is not.
Yeah, any further questions or comments? If not, let us thank all the three speakers today and all the speakers that spoke in this RISE Samvad series. Thank you one and all, especially Professor Jaya and her team. Thank you very much.